All right, let's dive into something a little different today.
Oh, yeah.
We're going behind the scenes to explore what happens after a house fire.
Okay.
And not talking about the flames and the firefighting,
Right.
but what happens after the fire trucks leave?
Right.
And companies like Disaster Recovery Queensland step in.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's this whole other side of things that people don't really think about.
Yeah.
But it's crucial. It really is.
So paint a picture for us here.
Sure.
I mean, we've all seen the images, the dramatic pictures of a house fire.
Yes.
But what are we actually talking about when we say fire damage?
So it's not just, what you see immediately, the charring and the smoke.
Uh-huh.
It's actually this kind of ongoing chemical reaction, which is happening at a microscopic level.
Okay.
So while the firefighters have done their heroic work, putting out the flames,
Right.
there's actually a whole other battle that's going on.
So it's more than just what we see on the surface.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually talking about microscopic soot particles
Okay.
that, embed themselves deep into porous materials under floorboards, inside air ducts, even, in your electronics.
Wow.
And these particles, often acidic, they start corroding surfaces.
Really?
Almost immediately.
Wow.
And that's where, the time-sensitive nature of this work comes in.
Okay, so let's say you're the homeowner.
Sure.
You're standing there. Maybe the fire department's just left.
Right.
You see the damage. You smell the smoke.
Yeah.
What's happening that you can't see?
Well, that smell is a big clue.
Okay.
It's not just a bad odor.
Right.
It's actually a sign of these things called volatile organic compounds,
Okay.
VOCs,
Okay.
that are released from burning materials.
And those can linger.
They can linger for months, even years.
Wow.
And they're not just unpleasant.
Right.
Some of them can be harmful to your health.
So it's like the danger is still present.
Yeah.
Even after the fire is out.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, the expertise of a company like Disaster Recovery Queensland comes in.
Okay.
They understand the science behind these invisible threats.
Right.
And they know how to combat them.
So Disaster Recovery Queensland is on the scene now.
Right.
What are some of the first things they do?
Well, the first thing they're going to do is look at the type of fire.
Okay.
Was it a grease fire in the kitchen?
Okay.
An electrical fire in the walls, or something else?
Right.
Because different types of fires create different types of smoke and residue,
Yeah.
and that's going to dictate the cleaning methods they use.
Oh, wow.
They're also assessing the extent of the damage.
Okay.
How far did the smoke travel? What materials were affected?
Sounds like detective work almost.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
They're taking samples.
Okay.
Analyzing materials.
Right.
Using specialized equipment to detect those hidden particles and VOCs
Wow.
that the homeowner wouldn't even know are there.
So they're not just mopping up some water and wiping down some soot.
No, not at all.
It's pretty high tech.
Yeah, this is a pretty sophisticated operation.
So think about what they're dealing with here.
Yeah.
Electronics.
Yes.
Exposed to smoke.
Right.
Antique furniture.
Exactly.
Delicate finishes.
Uh-huh.
Important documents.
Right.
That need to be salvaged.
Yeah, all kinds of things.
So we mentioned Disaster Recovery Queensland is based in Southeast Queensland.
Yeah.
Are there any unique challenges that come with working in this particular region?
Well, Southeast Queensland has a really diverse range of housing.
Right.
You've got everything from modern apartments to those older Queenslanders.
Yeah.
So, Disaster Recovery Queensland needs to be pretty adept at handling a wide variety of building materials
Okay.
and restoration techniques.
Right.
And plus our climate here, the humidity
Ugh.
and the occasional extreme weather can complicate the restoration process.
Okay, so they've assessed the damage. They know what they're dealing with.
Right.
What happens next?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because it's not just about cleaning.
Right.
It's about understanding the chemical makeup of the soot,
Okay.
the materials it's affecting,
Uh-huh.
and using the right cleaning agents and techniques to neutralize that damage.
So can you give us like a specific example?
Yeah, sure.
Uh-huh.
Let's say you've got acidic soot on a painted wall.
Okay.
Now they can't just scrub it off.
Right.
Because that could damage the paint even more.
Right.
So they might use like a specialized chemical sponge
Okay.
to gently lift the soot without harming the surface underneath.
Oh, wow.
Or for delicate fabrics, they might use ultrasonic cleaning,
Okay.
which uses sound waves to remove dirt and soot particles.
So it's almost like a science experiment.
It is.
Mixed with some very careful cleaning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And each situation is unique, you know?
Yeah.
So Disaster Recovery Queensland needs to tailor their approach into the specific materials and the type of damage that they're dealing with every time. And it's not just, you know, walls and furniture.
Right.
Electronics are a big challenge.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because smoke can get into all those tiny crevices and things.
Exactly.
Yeah, electronics are so sensitive.
And that smoke residue can be corrosive.
Right.
And cause, you know, short circuits and malfunctions down the line.
Wow.
So Disaster Recovery Queensland, you know, they've got technicians who specialize in cleaning and assessing electronics to see if they can be salvaged.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I never would have thought about that.
Right?
You know, the impact on things like TVs and computers and stuff.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the soot, the VOCs, the cleaning. What about the smell?
Oh, yeah.
How do they get rid of that lingering smoky odor?
Yes, the smell. That's one of the most, you know, persistent reminders of the fire.
Yeah.
And it can be really difficult to eliminate.
I bet.
Disaster Recovery Queensland uses a combination of techniques. They might use something called thermal fogging, which essentially, you know, vaporizes a deodorizing solution that penetrates deep into materials.
Right.
Or they might use ozone generators, which create ozone gas that breaks down odor molecules.
I remember reading about ozone being used in hotels to get rid of cigarette smells.
Yes.
So it's interesting that that same technology can be applied here.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And sometimes, you know, they might even have to remove and replace materials like a drywall or insulation if that odor has just permeated too deeply.
So it's not just about masking the smell.
No.
It's about actually neutralizing the source.
Yeah, getting rid of it.
Which is a whole other process.
It is.
And it can be extensive.
Yeah, very much so.
And all of this is happening while the homeowner is dealing with, you know, just the emotional fallout of the fire.
Absolutely.
You know, they've lost belongings.
Yeah.
They're displaced from their home, and they're facing this long road to recovery.
Yeah, and that's really, you know, where the human element of this work comes in. You know, Disaster Recovery Queensland isn't just dealing with buildings and belongings.
Right.
They're dealing with people's lives.
Yeah, and they're very sensitive to that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, they work closely with homeowners. You know, explaining the process, answering their questions, and just trying to alleviate, you know, some of that stress and anxiety that comes with, you know, going through an experience like this.
And I imagine that empathy and that communication is so crucial.
Oh, it's essential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when people are already feeling so vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's not just about empathy.
Right.
It's also about respect.
Okay.
You know, these are people's homes, their personal spaces, and Disaster Recovery Queensland, you know, they treat them with the utmost care and consideration.
Yeah. So we've talked about the technical aspects, the emotional side.
Right.
What about the environmental impact of fire restoration? I mean, there must be a lot of waste generated in this process.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And Disaster Recovery Queensland, you know, they're very mindful of their environmental footprint.
Yeah.
They carefully sort and dispose of contaminated materials,
right?
Following all the regulations to ensure that, you know, those things don't end up in landfills unnecessarily.
Okay.
They also try to salvage and restore as much as possible,
right?
Which, you know, minimizes waste and reduces the need for new materials.
So it's a very sustainable approach.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Considering not just the immediate cleanup, but the long-term impact as well.
Exactly. And they're also conscious of the products that they use.
Okay.
You know, they opt for environmentally friendly cleaning solutions whenever possible. You know, minimizing the use of harsh chemicals.
It's impressive to see how they've kind of integrated sustainability into every aspect of the work.
It is, yeah. And I think it's a reflection of their commitment to not just restoring homes, but also protecting the environment.
Right.
Especially here in Southeast Queensland, where, we're so aware of our natural surroundings.
Yeah. When I was reading through the material about Disaster Recovery Queensland, I was really struck by the stories of the items that they've been able to salvage.
Right.
Things that seemed completely lost.
Yes.
Were brought back to life.
Yeah.
It must be so rewarding.
It is.
To be able to give people those pieces of their lives back.
It really is. And, those stories really highlight the artistry and the skill involved in this work. It's not just about cleaning and repairing. It's about understanding the materials, the history, the sentimental value of these objects.
Can you share a few examples?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
One that comes to mind is this elderly couple who lost almost everything in a fire.
Wow.
Including their precious wedding album.
Oh, no.
And Disaster Recovery Queensland was able to painstakingly separate the water-damaged pages.
Wow.
Clean them and reassemble the album.
Oh, wow.
And the look on the couple's faces when they received their restored album. It was priceless.
I bet.
They said it was like getting a piece of their history back.
Right, and it speaks to the power of those objects.
Yeah.
That they hold so much more than just their physical form.
Absolutely. Another story that comes to mind is about a young artist.
Okay.
Whose entire portfolio of paintings was damaged in a fire.
Oh, wow.
And Disaster Recovery Queensland's art restoration specialists worked tirelessly to remove the smoke damage and restore the paintings to their former glory.
Wow.
It was a delicate and time-consuming process, but the result was incredible. The artist was overjoyed to have her artwork back.
Right.
Her creative spirit rekindled.
That's amazing. It's a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, there's still hope.
Yeah.
And there are people out there dedicated to helping others rebuild their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's amazing how they can bring these items back to life.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're piecing together people's memories.
Right.
Along with their belongings.
It's a great way to put it. They're not just restoring objects, they're restoring a sense of normalcy, of continuity of history.
Right.
And that's especially important in a place like Southeast Queensland, where we have such a strong connection to our homes and our communities.
We've talked about the science of fire damage restoration.
Right.
The technical skill, the environmental considerations, and the human impact.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that Disaster Recovery Queensland takes a very holistic approach to their work.
Absolutely. And I think that's what sets them apart.
Yeah.
They understand that fire damage restoration is about so much more than just cleaning and repairing.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the science, the emotions, and the long-term impact on people's lives and the environment.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of fire damage restoration, what's the one key takeaway you want our listener to remember?
I think that the biggest thing is that fire damage is often invisible and insidious.
Right.
So even if a home looks salvageable after a fire, there's likely more damage lurking beneath the surface.
Okay.
So calling in experts like Disaster Recovery Queensland isn't just about cleaning up.
Right.
It's about protecting your health, your belongings, and your peace of mind.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's easy to kind of underestimate the extent of the damage.
Oh, yeah.
And think you can just tackle it yourself.
Yeah.
But as we've learned today, that could be doing more harm than good.
Absolutely. Fire restoration is a complex process.
Right.
It requires specialized knowledge, skills, and equipment.
Yeah.
This is not a DIY project.
This deep dive has been truly eye-opening.
Yeah.
I know I'll never look at fire damage the same way again.
Me neither. It's made me realize just how much we take for granted. The safety and security of our homes and how devastating it would be to lose those things.
Right.
But, it's also given me hope. Knowing that there are companies like Disaster Recovery Queensland out there ready to help pick up the pieces and restore what's been lost.
It really makes you think, what items in our own homes would we be most devastated to lose in a fire? And why?
Right.
It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
And, maybe it can help us appreciate the work of these restoration professionals even more.
Absolutely. And maybe it can also inspire us, to take steps to protect our precious belongings and memories.
Right.
Whether it's backing up photos, creating a home inventory, or simply taking the time to appreciate the things that matter most.
Well said. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope this journey into the world of fire damage restoration has been insightful.
Yeah.
And perhaps even empowering, knowing that even in the face of devastation, there's hope for recovery and renewal.